Hello and welcome to Worldview at the Hindu with me, Suhasini Haidar. This week, a month into India's coronavirus second wave crisis, we're going to look at the hits and the misses of Indian diplomacy in this time.
The first batch of medical aid from Britain has arrived. France, Saudi Arabia and even India's arch-rival Pakistan have also offered help. The US is finally releasing raw materials to make vaccines.
Now, India's international diplomacy, led by the Ministry of External Affairs, has focused really in the past month on three main things: appealing for aid from the international community, and we dealt with some of that in our last episode, to pushing other countries at the World Trade Organization for support on its petition to waive patents on vaccines for COVID, and on India's image management during the crises. So let's just evaluate these, taking them one by one. Firstly, it is clear to see that the appeal that went out from the government, amplified through Indian embassies in at least 40 countries, has met with success. Offers of aid have poured in. In fact, according to government figures, between April 27th and May the 6th, India received more than 1,800 oxygen concentrators, 1,800 oxygen cylinders, 9 big, massive oxygen generation plants, as well as more than 2,400 ventilators, BiPAP, CPAPs, and nearly 3 lakh vials of the much-needed drug remdesivir, or much-in-demand drug remdesivir, including about 10,000 that came from Bangladesh. The US, UK, France, Germany, European Union, others have all sent several plane loads each. The largest generator really came in. It was brought on loan from Germany. It came on 2 plane loads. It is meant, once it is installed, to produce about 400,000 liters of oxygen per day. It will be based in one DRDO hospital in Delhi for COVID, but it will also be available to refill other oxygen containers. More is expected, perhaps beyond what anyone imagined. But at the same time, questions have been raised about the delays in distributing the aid, the lack of transparency in just where that aid was going to begin with. In a departure from the norm, we actually saw a country like France identifying the specific hospitals in the cities that they would be delivering to. More criticism followed when it emerged that nearly all of the aid that the government had received through the Indian Red Cross. Remember, foreign countries are sending it to the Indian Red Cross that hands it over to the Ministry of Health. Nearly all of this was meant for central government hospitals in different parts of the country, some of whom are already receiving oxygen supplies and aid from the government as well as from the PM CARES Fund. Now, in an interview to The Hindu this week, German Ambassador Walter Lindner said it's still early days to really criticize these delays, that some of the time was taken due to clearances, unpacking and repacking of the supplies. Even the fact, he said, that many officials had themselves contracted COVID along the way and they had to then replace them with other officials delayed a little of the process. But what is clear, despite all the reasons for it, is that the initial opportunity when the aid actually arrived to help people immediately has been missed. So on this count, perhaps the scorecard has been mixed. So let's turn to point number 2. The next task has seen much more success. After months of dogged persistence, Prime Minister Modi's own outreach to US President Biden for support in a telephone call between them, the United States finally decided to review its opposition to the India-South Africa petition presented at the WTO in October 2020 to waive TRIPS, or intellectual property rights on vaccines for COVID. Simply put, this would mean that all countries in the WTO would allow the unlicensed manufacture of COVID vaccines during the current pandemic period. For the US, which has always protected the rights of its pharma majors, this is a big shift, and it has prompted other countries as well to now review their opposition. So this might have a domino effect. It remains to be seen Whether that decision will finally go through at the WTO, obviously it depends on a full consensus at the WTO. India and South Africa already have about 100 countries of the developed world supporting them. But countries like Germany have announced already that they are still opposed to opening up the patent regime. Much will depend on the India-EU Leaders Summit on Saturday, shaping the European Union's point of view on the petition in the weeks ahead. And negotiations there might still take time. We may not see those vaccines being produced very quickly. But from India's point of view, this is an important moment in global leadership for constructive and cooperative solutions to the crisis. So on this count, a big success. And then there's the MEA's third task of ensuring India's image abroad is not damaged by the crisis. And here, unfortunately, we've seen several examples of what can only be described as mishandling. The government, for example, has gone out of its way to react to articles in various international dailies' commentary that are too many to count, really, which have roundly criticized the Modi government for being unprepared for this crisis, for delays in delivering oxygen to the hospitals, particularly in Delhi, when many have died due to the shortages. In particular, the Indian High Commission in Australia's high-handed response letter to an article also came across as excessive. Then the MEA engaged in what looked like an unseemly spat with embassies in Delhi who had reached out to political activists who were offering oxygen cylinders. In a formal statement, the MEA virtually accused embassies, who, remember, are very badly hit by the pandemic themselves. Their staff members are ill, down, some have had to airlift them out of the country. And the MEA actually accused them, or seemed to be accusing them, of hoarding essential supplies. And then there was the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar's visit to London this week for a G7 foreign ministers meeting that eventually looked like another misstep, as 2 members of the Indian delegation tested positive for the virus, and the whole delegation, including Dr. Jaishankar, had to be quarantined and isolated there, leading many to question whether it had been necessary at the time to have gone at all or to have attended it virtually while taking care of the aid distribution in India. Eventually, remember, the world's empathy and concern for India is real. It has been expressed loudly by its actions, and therefore these diplomatic overreactions are wholly avoidable. What is important instead is to show results in terms of curbing the COVID cases, the effective use of the aid on the ground. There is the prism that image can never be greater than the reality itself. In the next few weeks, we will see more diplomatic outreaches, and the MEA and PM's calendars seem to be quite full. On May the 8th, there is the EU-India Leaders Summit. Remember, 27 EU leaders will be gathered there in Portugal. Prime Minister Modi will attend via video link. On May 21st, there's the Global Health Summit in Rome. Again, PM Modi expected to make his appearance via virtual link. And then at the end of the month, Mr. Modi will hold a virtual summit with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. This is important not just because it's a biannual event, it's an important moment. It is also an important time for cooperation in India-Germany cooperation over the pandemic. And it is Ms. Merkel's last such engagement with India as she steps down soon. In June, Prime Minister Modi, in person or virtually, it's still to be known, will attend the G7 summit in the UK, where India is a special invitee. And if he goes, there is the possibility of a Quad summit there as well. And of course, we will track all of these for you. They're at the www.thehindu.com. Do subscribe. You might also find interesting an article by Professor Happymon Jacob. He calls it the COVID blot on Indian diplomacy, pretty strong criticism. As well as if you go on YouTube, there is Mr. Jaishankar's defense of Indian diplomacy on a talk in London that he gave called "Does India Have a Plan?" And then we have our book recommendation, particularly since India and the EU is much in focus this week. A former ambassador to the EU, Bhashpati Mukherjee, wrote The Insider's View on India and the EU, and certainly has very interesting details, particularly about the FTA negotiations. Remember, that started in 2007, was suspended in 2013, now might actually restart. That's all we have time for here on Worldview this week, but do join us again. And from the team here, thanks for watching.